Now, inspired by his childhood recollections of the tramp as a mythic, romantic figure, the comedian Arthur Smith pulls on his walking boots and sets off in search of the modern tramp, accompanied along the way by a curious, antiquated guidebook. The Gentle Art of Tramping.
Sorry, we'll have a slight interruption here while I switch this alarm off, otherwise we're going to be interrupted every few minutes. I'm so worried about time. But unfortunately one can't totally escape the issues of time.
The Gentle Art of Tramping. Part 1. Tramping maketh manners.
There's a song which my partner likes to play to me. Here's to you, my rambling man, my rambling boy. May all your rambles bring you joy.
Sometimes to me it's just the hustle and bustle of everyday life out there in towns and cities and things like that. But, for me personally, you just need to get away from it. Like, you get like itchy feet. Like there's something out there, and you're trying to chase, whether it's dreams or rainbows, as they say, But I just think, actually, let's just stop chasing something that's possibly not there. I'll just go out because I want to go out, enjoy it.
I've been out and about for several years now. I loses a bit of track after time. It's a little difficult to quite reflect how it all came about. It seemed to drift a bit, really, but I've always had an interest in the outdoors, so it wasn't too difficult to cope out there, and I was certainly struggling coping in the standard mode of life, whatever word you want to use, normal mode of life.
In 1926, a writer called Stephen Graham published a book called The Gentle Art of Tramping, which gave its readers practical advice on how to be a tramp, with chapter headings like Boots, The Knapsack, The Tramper's Cook, Tobacco, Marching Songs, and The Companion. Written in a lyrical, rather antiquated style, it also meditates on the philosophy of the tramp. Listen to this. It is a gentle art. Know how to tramp and you know how to live. Manners maketh man.
And tramping maketh manners. Know how to meet your fellow wanderer, how to be passive to the beauty of nature, and how to be active to its wildness and its rigour.
For your knowledge,
Tramping
Doctor,
brings one to reality.
61 wives.
There are some still get the bag and they'll go down to Cornwall, Penzance, where the daffodils are done every year around February time. They're working with the daffodils. Then you got strawberries at West Vetch, Cambridge, Petworth, Chichester Way, all that way. That was a big scene years ago, and fruit pecking was always a great one. And that's what the man of the road was like then. He liked his freedom.
Freedom is crucial to the tramp. I remember going on a holiday to Devon when I was a child and coming across a grubby-looking man sat outside a pub in a battered hat with a crusty beard, string for a belt, and on his face a big toothless smile. The guy was magnificently unlike the other people I'd seen in the village. He seemed free of all convention. Yet I asked myself, did I really meet this tramp? My memory of him is suspiciously like pictures I had seen and been intrigued by. Perhaps I made him up to fit into some notion of the past I have. For me, it's still an appealing image. Yet, sleeping under a hedge may seem romantic, but I've been to Glastonbury, and that was bad enough. Well, tramp, one can think of it as a verb, first of all, to tramp along. The noun, a tramp, I think it could be deemed to be unacceptable in this. You're trying to demean perhaps homeless people, as we would say now, except that of course a tramp is a slightly different creature perhaps from a homeless person, and there isn't really modern day word for it, so maybe there aren't so many modern day, but a tramp is someone who, you know, like the Charlie Chaplin figure, has a kind of romance and an element of choice about their kind of haphazard life. We shall find out. We're going to visit a place that advertises that it welcomes wayfarers, a word that you don't hear much anymore. So perhaps I'll find some elucidation there. Perhaps I'll find a proper tramp who fits my own romanticised view of them.
Like in normal everyday life, as we say, you know, you get into it, what you're doing, your daily routine, you know, whether it's getting up, having a shower, having your breakfast, going to work, working, then coming home. It can be like that. You just get into a sort of a routine out there, like, you know what to do, where you're going, or what you're doing from day to day, like, you know.
When Stephen Graham wrote The Gentle Art of Tramping in the mid-1920s, he had spent many years on the road, walking through Russia, Central Europe and the United States, recounting his adventures along the way. His biographer is Michael Hughes.
For him, nature was kind of something you didn't just go and enjoy or consume, you kind of lived through it, you sensed the meaning of life through it. And there are times in Gentle Art of Tramping when he almost sounds like a slightly deranged mystic or perhaps an overgrown adolescent, looking for the meaning of life, thinking if he can touch that hill, that tree, he can sort of make himself a richer, more real person.
Yeah, because you sort of get the sense that he's almost about to go out again himself.
The idea of tramping was a great kind of escape for him, and I think he would have liked to be out there on the road, but actually he was hemmed in, probably in Paris where he wrote part of it, probably in his flat in London.
A lot of the lads took to the road because of the bored of the city life and looking at the same thing. Not ducking responsibilities or anything, you still got to do it, you know, you don't get away with anything. Oh no, anybody on the road will tell you don't get away with nothing. It appears to people that you do, but you don't. No way.
There is an artistic, cultural dimension to it as well. There's lots of songs and depictions of wayfarers and tramps in both comedy and in fiction and drama. They've always been a figure that can be both despised by some, it could be a kind of threat, or else representing a kind of city boy's dream of freedom away from the dull demands of the quotidian.
You can go back centuries seeing this kind of double idea of the tramp. First as a kind of figure of intrigue and romance, and secondly as a figure of fear and unsettling, because they seem to kind of undermine the settled order, partly because they could be a threat, but partly because they seem to carry the smell of somewhere else, other lives, other places. And that can be kind of dangerous.
Yeah, and they kind of appear from nowhere, and then they're gone again.
The Gentle Art of Tramping, Part 2. A relief to escape.
To me, there's nothing more exciting really than a little green sign on a post saying public footpath that leads up a hill.
What a relief to escape from being voter, taxpayer, authority on old brass, brother of man who is authority on old brass, author of bestseller. What a relief to cease being for a while a grade 3 clerk or grade 2 clerk who has reached his limit, to cease to be identified by one's salary or by one's golf handicap.
Since I've started going out and about like this, it's, I think it's done wonders for my health. I used to have permanent bags under the bags under the eyes when I was in the rat race. And otherwise, I've been remarkably lucky health-wise. And I think it may actually be the outdoors is actually good for your health.
I was born and raised in the city, and I've lived most of my life in cities. But like many city people, I have a sort of dream that I'm going to buy a big jumper and go and live in Cornwall and just wander about. And it's partly withdrawing from the rat race, as it used to be known, I suppose. A sense of freedom. You know, the idea that you don't know quite where you're going to spend the night. Spontaneity is something that is discouraged generally. You know, spontaneity, not quite knowing, in a sense, is a more accurate representation of being alive than pretending you do know.
One usually has some plan, but it's never set in concrete. Depending who one bumps into, one will adapt things. And this can be obviously particularly true if you're hitchhiking. You may be just thinking, I'll get to the next stop, or next town, but they're going a bit further, and it happens to be somewhat one of the more pleasant rides, interesting rides, and you're almost there before you know it, or gone past it before you know it.
A couple of years before writing The Gentle Art of Tramping, Graham had spent time sleeping in the doss houses of London. And
Precursor of George Orwell.
But whereas Orwell kind of sympathises with the tramps in the doss houses, Graham, there's a whiff of the prig about him, actually. Oh, these are tramps and vagabonds. These are not in the good sense of the word. These are people who are begging. These are perhaps petty criminals. And indeed, in 1924, Graham actually becomes a prison visitor in Pentonville. And he writes in his diary just how many of the people there are homeless. Graham himself actually lived in the same flat in Soho for 60 years, and he had somewhere to go to. And I'm sure that his definition of a tramp was a tramp by choice, someone who actually chose to walk the lanes, chose to commune with nature. The people he met in the doss houses, the people he met in Pentonville, they had no choice.
I've been made homeless a few times over the years, but sometimes I just choose to, you know. Yeah, it can be appealing. Sometimes it can be very daunting, but, you know, you sort of like when you're out there and you sort of think, oh, what am I doing now? Like, you know, why have I done this again to myself? Like, you know, and then, I don't know, I just settle with myself then and think, phew.
The Gentle Art of Tramping, Part 3. Earning a happiness.
You'll be surprised how little you actually need to rely on hard cash.
First few days, you know, it's a little bit lost-like. Well, everybody is at first, but you soon get the hang of it, you know.
You just only got to think, well, I've got to do something, like, you know. Just go from there.
Put money in thy purse is often given to the young man as a jewel of wisdom, but we give the contrary advice. Take it out. The less you carry, the more you'll see. The less you spend, the more you'll experience. In tramping, you're not earning a living, but earning a happiness.
Well, you don't actually need a lot of money, but you do rely on people's charity or friendliness. There's casual work around to be had. Although I don't actually beg, I have had people come up to me while I've been sitting on a bench resting or some such, and generously deposit some money in my fist and insist I take it.
We've arrived at Pilsdon at Malling Community. Welcome, please enter and ring porch bell. Barn chapel and services. Already a little sort of wooden thing. Was it selling vegetables? Anyway, we should go in. It looks like a rather nice, kind of quite rich suburban house.
Since the 60s, Cistercian monks lived here, and then since 2004, Pilsdon has been here.
This is the Reverend Pam Rink, guardian of the community at Pilsdon in Malling, Kent. Pilsdon is a Christian-based community which advertises that wayfarers seeking rest on their journey's way are welcome at our door. So who comes knocking on the door? What is a wayfarer?
Someone who is itinerant, someone who lives on the road, someone who has no fixed abode, someone who enjoys the freedom of not being in the one place.
But they've chosen
They've
this.
chosen that lifestyle.
Pam Rink kindly introduced us to Petra,
Well, thank you for this, Petra.
a former wayfarer who had reached the end of the road and settled at Pilsdon.
You woke up in the morning, right, here we go, I packed all my stuff in my bag, put my tent back on my bike, off I cycled for 30 miles, I end up in Rye. What am I doing here? Oh, it doesn't matter, it's just a town. Go and see the vicar, any chance, pick up a coffee, cheese sandwich, quiet, you know. Then you go off again, find 7 to sleep, the next morning, same again.
How long had you been living like that then for?
From 70, when I was 19, to 79, I was wandering around, and I got married. Then 85, got divorced, and I went back onto the streets. I didn't want to stay. I wanted to go back on the streets.
You wanted to? Why was that?
I didn't have to make friends with people. I didn't need any responsibilities. I didn't have to wash or dress or shave properly. I could do what I wanted. That went on to 90. Met somebody, stayed with them for 3 years. Then that split up. Then I started again. From 93 till I come 2004, I was all over the country. I was literally all over the place.
Petra's reasons for taking to the road are quite different from Stephen Graham's. Graham felt a need to poeticise his experiences. Michael Hughes again.
Now, if you look at the Gentle Art of Tramping, the best pages, without doubt, come in the last 30 or 40 pages. And I think Stephen Graham, he always wanted to be a poet, and what he tended to actually do was sort of insert lines of poetry into his prose.
Perhaps you'd like to give us some of your favourite ones?
The intuitive understanding rises slowly to the mind like light travelling from a distant planet to the earth. Or, your mind is at rest, you ask for nothing beyond perhaps good sleep, and belike you thank neither God nor yourself for having got there. But 10 years later you look back with a sigh and say, how wonderful it was. Ah, I was happy then.
The Gentle Art of Tramping, Part 4. Go forth with free necks. We no longer wear cravats. In fact, a collar and tie may be secreted in a pocket of the knapsack, to be unwillingly put on when it is necessary to visit a post office, or a bank, a priest, or the police. But otherwise, we go forth with free necks and throats, top button of shirt preferably undone.
What would you say characterises the wayfarers? Yes, a desire not to be anchored, a desire to be free. It's of course something we can all understand.
Yeah. And I suppose it's losing the trappings of the life that we have nowadays, which is hugely materialistic, hugely bound by consumerism and so on. And a lot of people find that incredibly difficult. They want to have a simple life. And the only way they can break out of that is to go on the road.
I do sleep rough. If I can get hold of a tent, I will find somewhere out the way, because I'm a country chap anyway, like, you know, and I don't like towns. If there is a town, I always try and find the nearest woodland area, or, you know, out in the countryside area, like, you know, if you don't need to come in town for anything, I won't, like, you know, I'll just stay out in the countryside.
Got options of church porches, bridges, well, obvious outbuildings.
If you could get in somewhere, fair enough. Okay, go. You know, that's there, you go for it, you know, but mainly it was a sleeping bag.
But then that must be sometimes freezing and wet and miserable, is it?
You go to a bus shelter and sit in there all day. It's shelter, it's a roof, I've got food, that's what I need. I had shelter and food. That's all you need.
If you really wanted to travel super light, then you'd probably get one of these emergency blankets. Plastic-sized tin foil, in fact. Amazingly useful at keeping you warm, even if you're just wearing your cosy in the frost, I think. Not that I've gone quite that far to test it out.
So how are you feeling now about it all? You're looking pretty good.
My life's changed completely, as you can see.
Yeah, you're wearing a rather fine... how would you describe your outfit?
Female.
You've got a nice pair of earrings.
Yeah, it all goes together. Because another reason I was on that, because of how I am, my gender, by the way, that's another reason for keeping away from people. So they don't get to know that I want to wear this and be...
But of course, these days, men wearing dresses, and it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but to me, it's very important. Right, let's behave like a bloke, let's get scrappy. So I was hiding. Basically, I was actually hiding away from telling people this is what I'm like, and this is the first time I've been able to actually do what I want to do here. And now it's too late, basically, because I'm too old.
Oh, I don't know. You're looking pretty good, Petra.
I'm 61 years old. I'm too old for this.
Never too late to fall in love. Dooby-doo, dooby-doo.
The Gentle Art of Tramping. Part 5. Better to have been unobserved. As evening comes on, the tramp should become more shy. It is a mistake to choose one's evening camp in full view of the highway. For one's own subsequent peace of mind, it is better to have been unobserved.
Always found it a little difficult for striking up and maintaining friendships, but I've probably made more actually while I'm out and about. Paths keep crossing with fellow travellers, and then quite some very, very helpful, friendly people I've just got to stop to chat to or have given me lifts. Invited me to stay over, or offers a little bit of casual work here and there.
But I think sometimes what I find helpful is I more go on the assumption of I'll just be me and be on my own. Anyone else comes along, fine, but I'm always wary then when you meet somebody out there because they say, "Oh, hello, mate, I'm homeless, you, yeah," then, you just sort of get a little bit of time to get to know them, and sometimes I just sort of think, I think I'll just stick to my own guns for now,
I didn't want to be amongst people, I didn't want to socialise yet. I went for months and months and months not talking to anybody. Purposely, I kept out of people's way. I went out in the middle of the country, in the middle of nowhere, so I didn't have to meet people.
Yeah, the caravans, we've got 2 caravans, they're over there.
I see, yeah.
For the wayfarers.
The tramp, the wayfarer, may enjoy solitude and freedom, but in places like Pilsdon, he can also relish a chance to meet up with his fellow travellers.
They tell the stories of what's been happening on the route. They tell stories about other people that we all know that they've met somewhere along the way.
Sounds quite entertaining.
Last year we had one of our regulars was killed in a fire. He'd fallen asleep with his heater on, or his barbecue or whatever it was, and he was killed, and that caused huge pain really amongst the people who live here who know him, for us, and for the wayfarers that came by that knew him.
So it's in a sense a close-knit community.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And they're presumably fairly fit.
Yes, they are. But it does come a stage where they can't do it anymore, depending on their health and their age.
And what happens then?
Well, they have to find somewhere to stop, and that can be quite hard.
Have you come across some wayfarers?
Well, we have had a couple who've come here who've said, we've had it now, we can't do another winter outside. Perhaps they will stay here for a while, but they always have itchy feet and they'll go on somewhere else. And it's the same in Dorset. There's one very elderly chap who's been living in Dorset for a while because he couldn't stand the road anymore, and he's gone. They're quite worried about him.
They don't know where he's gone.
Upped and gone.
Pam's talking about Pilsdon's partner community in Dorset. We went there a week or so later to find the elderly chap, whose name we learned was George, had returned.
I'm 71 now. When I came back, it was like somebody just come down from Everest when I got back last week. The reason I left was to go around Berkshire, Newbury, places I used to know, back down through Swint, Chippenham, Trowbridge, and then eventually back to Wincanton, back to here.
George had been gone for 6 weeks. No one knew where. Other community members referred to him with a mix of amusement and awe. He would have been back sooner, he said, if it hadn't been for the rain.
The road got flooded, so I stayed in Wincanton. I had the sleeping bag, so I stayed there for 3 nights. Behind the community church and then the council, there's a big porch. I could have gone use the hall, but I didn't want to, you know. It was a terrible state, but I got out of it, you know.
Obviously in the background one has to be aware that your health won't hold out forever. Old age creeps up with it and puts restrictions on what you can do. By the means in which I've got here, it's difficult to envisage falling back into the more traditional or normal way of doing things and 4 walls around you and all the pressures of modern living, really, in an urban environment. If I'm lucky, then I'll last out longer than most, and if not, I'll have to see what happens.
Which of us has not, in periods of stress or despair, fantasised about running away from it all, just walking and not looking back? Of course, this life is a hard one, but it retains, nonetheless, a mythic, romantic appeal. It was a gentle art for Stephen Graham almost a century ago, and who knows, probably on a good day, with the sun out and the way clear, it still is. But unless you've actually done it, unless you've stepped out, it's difficult to understand completely. Only by talking to people who have chosen to try it, you get a sense of the possibilities and the realities of life on the road. Our guides have been David, who's steering clear of the city still.
My main mode of transport is Shanks's pony if I'm not hitchhiking. A lot of major cities can be quite difficult to negotiate if you just want to go by.
Petra, glad to be safe indoors at last.
I stepped in a station, or I stepped in a toilet, or under hedges, and I thought, this is getting silly now.
Simon, who's thinking over the offer of a long-term place at Pilsdon and may have finally finished all his roamings.
Perhaps the work ethic and the roof over your head ethic and, you know, in with other people integrating and all that. It just might make me suddenly think, oh, well, I'm 45 now. This time to settle a bit more, like, you know.
And George.
You got the freedom of movement.
Who, I suspect, will always be a man of the road, a wayfarer, a master of the gentle art of tramping.
One bloke said to me, I don't think the road's there at all, it's just something we do. It's a lovely freedom. And that's all I remember.
The Gentle Art of Tramping was presented by Arthur Smith. The producer was Martin Williams.